Hello, welcome to the Church360 Ledger Basic Principles and Chart of Accounts webinar. Hi, my name is Rod Kiles and I am the manager of Concordia Technology Solutions Support. I've been with the company for quite a while now and I really appreciate the opportunity to serve churches. You can reach me one of two ways. You can reach me by email at rod.kiles@cph.org. And of course, you can give me a call at 314-268-1315. I kindly ask that you mute your phones and or microphones. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type those in the question window. It'll be located on the right-hand side of your screen in most cases. And there'll be a little orange arrow you can click on to expand and collapse that area. So joining me today is going to be Jim Bowling. He's one of our software support technicians. You may have spoken to him in the past. He does man the phone lines with the other guys, and he also answers support emails as well. But he'll be answering any questions that you guys have along the way, and you can email him at jim.bowling@cph.org. You can also give him a call at 314-268-1315. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at our class agenda. So all of these sessions are broken up into little parts where we'll kind of separate the webinar and cover different topics. So we're going to start out with the overview and basically describe the different topics that we're going to cover today. Then after we get through the overview, we'll jump into the discussion where I'll just explain each one of those topics. So one thing that's a little different about this webinar, there's additional slides in this webinar kind of detailing some of the larger concepts that we're going to need to know in order to manage Church360 Ledger. So there's a handful of more slides, maybe a couple handfuls of additional slides, but they'll just help us land the points of important topics and notions that we need to know about Church360 Ledger. So discussion, then we'll have a short 5-minute intermission. This session is scheduled for 90 minutes. So we take a break somewhere 45, 50, 55 minutes to step away for 5 minutes, get something to drink, take a little break, whatever we need to do during that time period. So after the intermission, we'll reconvene and we'll cover any of the topics that we haven't covered so far. Then we'll have our quiz and we'll have our question and answer session. So with the quiz, it's one of those things where we just do that to tie up a few loose ends and possibly foster additional questions. No pressure on the quiz or anything like that. And then question and answer session, if there's any questions that have been posted in the question box that I haven't answered, I will answer those at that point in time, or I guess any question that Jim hasn't answered, I'll answer those at that point in time. And you may have some questions that just pop up at the very end of the session as well, and you can feel free to post those questions, and I'll answer those. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through the overview. So we're going to start out by going through basic accounting principles. So there's some principles that are true to this form of accounting that we're going to be doing. So we're going to talk about accounting and talk about important little nuances about this to kind of clear up some misconceptions that creep into using the software. So then from there, we're going to do what I call getting started. So we're going to walk through logging into the software. We're going to show site navigation. We're also going to show you how to import your database. So I created a new Church360 Ledger software. You may be completely new to the software, and you may want to import your data from Shepherd staff. So we have a test database or a sample database, and we're going to show you how to import that database. So then from there, we're going to jump into setup. Where we'll show you how to configure your administrative settings. We'll show you how to manage books and create books. We'll also discuss fiscal years a little bit further. Then we'll discuss the chart of accounts, where we'll go through each one of the account types. So there's only certain account types in the software, but we'll go through each one of those. Of course, we'll talk about restricted funds. We'll discuss budgets, and we'll discuss payees. So once we get through payees, we'll wrap everything up with our quiz and our question and answer session. Then we'll head to lunch, and then some of you will join me for the session later on this afternoon as well. So that's going to be our our training session on reports and bank account reconciliation. So there's a second session as well. But okay, so that's the overview. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So we're going to switch screens, and we're going to go over to Church360 members. And I've got two monitors, so one of the monitors is on the right. So let me go ahead and hide my toolbar and see if this is going to work for me today. If it does, perfect. If not, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, it's not going to hide for me today. That's okay. Okay, so when it comes to Church360 Ledger, everybody who accesses the software is going to have a login, and they're going to have a subdomain. So also, I'm going to turn off the webcam so that we can focus in on the presentation and not so much of my head moving around there. Okay, so at the top of the window, there's going to be your subdomain, and each church is going to have its own subdomain. So I've created this one called learn.360ledger.com, and I have a login for it, and it's just my name. I do have the autofill set, but that's something you can decide whether or not you want to use on your computer. So I have my username and password. That will allow me to sign in and give me certain rights to the software. If you forget your password, you can use forgot your password here. And it will allow you to send yourself an email. So you click forgot password. All these usernames and passwords are self-administered. So you just type in your email address, then click send me reset password, send me reset password instructions. Then it'll send you an email with a link. You click on the link, and then that will allow you to sign into the software and reset your password. So, but I'm just going to log in. I know the password for mine, so that's going to take me into the software. When you log into the software, this is going to allow you to land here on what I call the home screen. And on this home screen, it's going to have a menu bar across the top. So there's going to be an orange $ that allows you to go here to the main menu and to go to the home page. To the right of that is going to be our book selector. And the book selector allows you to select the book that you're going to be in when you're working with the software. So you can have more than one book inside of the program. And actually, if you guys don't mind, I want to double back just a second. When I switched over to this screen, I kind of got into a habit that I have with these presentations. And usually after I get done with Let's Get Started, I jump over into the software and I start going through the presentation. But like I was saying earlier, there's these additional slides, and I need to cover these slides to discuss the basic accounting principles. And then I'll talk about the site navigation and a few other things. So basic accounting principles. So with Church360 Ledger, it is fund accounting. So it's going to be software where each book is considered a separate accounting entity with its own assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. So it kind of has these books that are inside the system that is each almost like its own business. And I don't like to use the term business when we're talking about churches, but it's its own entity, it's its own thing. So that kind of goes back to what I was showing in the software literally just a second ago, where you had like the church and the thrift shop and the school, and it could be a cemetery and it could be a daycare. So there's those different items, and each one would be its own book. It would generate its own reports. Those reports are separate. So it's a completely separate entity. And another note, these accounts are used to track funding given to an organization. So given to the church, given to the thrift shop. So that's what these funds are for. So, and I would also add that any money transferred between the books should be considered a loan that is to be paid back unless it is a gift. So when you're creating transactions between these books and you're taking a look at it, you're going to have to use two accounts to transfer the money. And usually it ends up hitting lines on your statement of income and expense. So when you're transferring the money, you want to think about whether or not it's going to be paid back, because it could show as an expenditure on your statement of income and expense, depending on how you create the transaction. So it might be something that you want to do a transfer or a transaction between an asset and a liability account, so it doesn't show on your statement of income and expense. But you do want to kind of think about that when transferring money between your books. Okay, so number two, when working with Church360 Ledger, it is cash accounting. So anything that we do inside of Church360 Ledger is going to be cash based for the most part. So lots of times people will ask, well, is this accrual accounting? And this is not accrual accounting. So it's cash accounting when the checks are entered into the system, or when checks are written, you enter those in. When deposits are made, you enter that into the system. And it's at times when it's when that task is completed. Oh, I do see a question in the question box, and I just want to make sure that that's answered. And Betty is asking, should we be seeing a ledger? And I went into the software, and now I've come back. So you should be seeing my PowerPoint presentation. Let me switch over. That should look better there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so this is cash accounting. It's not accrual accounting. Income is recorded and recognized when the money is received, and expenses are recorded and recognized when the money is spent. So cash accounting, just everything that you enter into the system is automatically going to apply to the books. This is not going to be a case where you're entering in invoices, or you're entering in upcoming transactions and then creating reports based on that. This is just strictly cash accounting. The benefits of cash accounting, it's easier to track money coming in and going out. It's easier to explain to your congregation or church council where everything stands when it comes to your books. And it's also safer, since you won't run into cash flow problems when several accounts come due at once, because you'll know exactly where you're at. So that's one of the reasons, or those three of the reasons why we went with cash accounting. Church360 Ledger also uses a finance year. And I guess it's finance year or fiscal year, depending on if it's calendar or non-calendar. These finance years are going to consist of 12 consecutive months. So it doesn't do partial years or anything like that. It's always going to be 12 rolling months, or 12 months, not rolling months, but 12 months within the finance year. You do have the options of calendar or non-calendar. So it could be January 1st through December 31st. Or it could be non-calendar, for example, like August 1st through July 31st. So it could be either of those two scenarios. And we have lots of churches who use calendar years, and we have lots of churches who use non-calendar years. So. And these are referred to by the end date of the end year. So when you're speaking of a calendar year, you'll just be like, hey, that's finance year or fiscal year 2019. Or if it's a non-calendar year and the year ends in the following year, 2020, you'll be like, hey, this is fiscal year 2020. So it is shown as the end of the year, or it is mentioned or spoken of as the end year when we're talking about these. So the end year where the finance year ends. A question came in from, I need to make that a little bit bigger. The question came in from Landy. Hello, Landy. And Landy asked, will we receive a copy of the PowerPoint as well? And they are supposed to send the PowerPoint out as well as the recording. So I'll reach out to the team and ask them, what's the deal with that. And if they're not sending it out, I'll send it out myself to everybody. Okay. Okay, so finance year referred to by the by the date of the last end of the year there. So this is double entry bookkeeping. So the basis of this principle is that the basic principle of this standard accounting system is that there will always be at least 2 accounts on every transaction, and that the debits and credits on the transactions must balance. So just a few moments ago, I was talking about, well, you might be transferring money between funds and you have to have 2 accounts on every single transaction. That's this principle right here. So you're always going to be crediting one account and debiting another account, and you could be crediting multiple accounts and debiting multiple other accounts, but between all of those accounts, the credits and debits must balance on those transactions. So I'm kind of keep it at a high level there. There's other kind of principles and stuff within that, but for most churches, just knowing that it's double entry bookkeeping or dual entry bookkeeping is enough to know that you need to have balanced credits and debits. And an example would be that when a deposit is made, money goes not only into an asset checking account, but it also goes to an offset tracking account that shows where the money was from or what it was for. And with deposits or checks, you'll have your bank account as one line item, and then you'll have an offset account as the other line item. And deposits are great examples. So like you'll have the bank account, and then you'll have all of your income accounts on that, and the total of the income accounts balance what's going into the bank account. Okay, so account types. I'm going to leave account types for right when we get to the chart of accounts part of the software. So sorry for the back and forth there. Let's switch over to Church360 Ledger. And everybody should be able to see my ledger screen right now. So I've gone ahead and I've logged in, and I want to go through the site navigation here so everybody kind of understands the buttons and things. So I mentioned the home button just a moment ago. There's also Christ Community Church. That's our book selector, so you'll be able to navigate between the books. Most churches are just going to have one book, but you may have more than one book, and if that's the case, you can switch between those books. To the right of our book selector is going to be 5 little icons. The first icon is our check print queue. So whenever you enter a check into the system, it's going to flow into this queue. And from there, you'll either print the check or you'll mark the check as printed. So the check print queue is incorporated with the whole check printing process. And we'll talk more about the print queue in our training this afternoon. But it's going to be where you go to print checks. To the right of that is our pending transaction icon. And pending transactions allows you to generate transactions either from recurring transactions or from the deposits that are handed over from Church360 members. So you're going to have a financial secretary or an offering counter that's going to go into Church360 members. They're going to enter offerings into the system. When they enter the offerings into the system, that offering batch is going to flow over into Church360 Ledger, where you can retrieve it from this view, and then you can go ahead and make the deposit at that point in time. So this pending transaction area is kind of like a little funnel that funnels information into the view. So and you'll notice that it says 504. For people who convert from Shepherd staff, it does turn every single offering batch into a deposit. And if that happens, just let us know. We can delete those. You can also go in here, depending on how many they are, you can go in here and you can click on the little X, and then that'll just delete those old transactions. Now, if you have a lot of them, deleting those old transactions is going to be something that is going to be time consuming. Just let us know and we can send a ticket over to the programmers and they can get rid of them. But We can delete those for you if need be. So, okay, so to the right of the pending transactions icon is going to be the reports icon, and that's going to allow you to access the different reports inside of the software. So there's going to be general ledger, statement of income and expense, chart of accounts, balance sheet, and then there's going to be the event log. So those are the different reports, and the event log tracks the different things that users do inside of the program. To the right of that is going to be the settings gear, and this is going to be the area where you manage your general site settings. There is a section called general, but this is also where you'll manage your chart of accounts. You'll enter in your budgets. You can view and modify your fiscal year, so if you're switching from a calendar year to a non-calendar year. And also it's also where you can manage your recurring transactions, import transactions, like if you're a church that uses paychecks, you can import those transactions directly into the software. Then it's also general settings, your users, your roles, your books, and your payees. So we'll go through a good portion of of these items this morning, and we'll go through some of these items this afternoon as well to finish them up. To the right of that is going to be our profile icon where we can log out of the software, and the timer is set at 2 hours. So if you don't use the software for 2 hours, it'll just automatically log you out. But if you're in a public place or something, or you're in an area where somebody else can access your computer, you can just log out of the software when you get done. The user settings allow you to change your default email address, and they allow you to change your password as well. So those are the settings. So let's go ahead and look at a couple other little conventions inside of the software. Then we'll go through the process of importing a database. So when you're here inside of the program, you can kind of navigate around and use the home button to take you back to the home screen. When you're inside this view, you can find an account by going to this white bar here, and we call this the Omni bar, but it allows you to type in letters and numbers. The search is based on the account name, so when you're looking here and you go to type in letters, it's going to look at the account name. It doesn't search throughout the account number, but if you want to search by the account number, you can just include the account number in the account name. But you can find the account that you're looking for, click on the account, then it will jump you into that account. So this is kind of like a shortcut for finding and accessing accounts. To the right is going to be the new transaction button, which allows you to create transactions, and we'll go through each one of the transaction types and show you some different ways to create transactions or some different types of transactions. So then there's the navigation down here, and that allows you to jump back and forth into different layers of your chart of accounts, but you can also click on the mini graphs down here and go forward in the navigation. So if you start out at home, you'll use the mini graphs to find the accounts that you're looking for. And then if you need to go back, you can just click on the hyperlink to go backwards if you'd like. So you can, and sometimes I see people will just have this collapsed. They don't want to see the mini graph, so they'll just collapse that. And you'll also notice now that I'm all the way down to the checking account that the reconcile option is there as well. So the reconcile button only shows where you are. The reconcile button only shows when you're inside a checking account, all the way down to that bottom level. So if you're here on Central Trust, it's not going to show the reconcile button. So, okay, so to the right of that, there's going to be export to Excel, print, and then there's going to be your date selector. And we'll show more of that upcoming as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now that we know how to kind of navigate through the software, for those customers who are new, I want to show starting the software up and importing the data. There we go. So what I did was, prior to the start of the session, I created a new Church360 ledger site, and anybody who gets this email will be able to set up the account. So usually it's just going to be one person, but you can go here and you can say set up your account now, and then that's going to take you into your it's going to take you into your Church 360 ledger site. So this one's called First Community Church, and then at this point I can fill in my email address, rod.kiles at rod.kiles@cph.org. And then you can type in your password. You will need to confirm your password. At that point, you'll go to sign up, and it'll actually create you as the administrator when you go through that process. So next we'll go to First Community Church. We'll verify our church name, phone number, and church address. Excuse me just one second. Thanks for holding there, I appreciate it. Okay, so you'll verify your church information and you'll click submit. There we go. Then from there, you're literally at a Y in the road. So it'll allow you to either create your first book, or it'll allow you to import your data from Shepherd Staff. Currently, Shepherd Staff is the only software that you can import data from. So if you're converting from QuickBooks or another third-party financial software, you'll have to start from scratch and manually create your first book. So you can name your first book, you can select the starting month, and then you can select the starting date for your book. So the starting month will determine your fiscal year. So if you select January, it's going to be calendar fiscal year. If you select March, it's going to be a non-calendar fiscal year starting in March. So you do want to be careful with that and make sure that your starting month does match your fiscal year. The start date for your book is going to be where your initial balance falls, and it's also going to be the date where you can enter your oldest transaction. So if I say 1/1/2019, that's as far back as I can go to enter transactions. So if in my head I'm saying, hey, I want to enter in all of 2018's information, then I need to change this to 2018. And then that will allow me to go back to 1/1/2018 and enter in those transactions. So, and then I can click submit. It's going to create my first book. You don't want to call your first book your name. In most cases, you'll call it the church's name. I've seen people call it the general fund, but in most cases, you're going to call it the church's name. To the right is going to be, if you're a Shepherd Staff customer, you'll notice how it has choose file. You'll need to choose your Shepherd Staff database, and we can help you find the database and choose the correct database. You'll have the choice to import everything from Shepherd Staff, and you'll also have the choice to just import the current balances from Shepherd Staff. At times, there can be some confusion around these two choices. So, and it centers around the concept of dedicated accounts and restricted funds. So when looking at this, the importer has the ability to import all of your transactions if you don't have dedicated accounts. So Shepherd Staff has a concept called dedicated accounts. It's a form of a liability. So it's kind of like a special liability inside of Shepherd Staff, but Church 360 Ledger does not have that concept. So if you have dedicated accounts inside of Shepherd Staff and you're converting to Church 360 Ledger, at this time you will not be able to import transactions. So you'll either go with the option for import chart of accounts only, or if you select this option and it detects that there's dedicated accounts in the system, it'll automatically switch you over in the background to import your chart of accounts with current balances only. So kind of like the determining factor is those dedicated accounts. And once that's determined, the system doesn't have a means or a method for importing transactions that have dedicated accounts because it doesn't have the dedicated account concept. So I'm going to go to choose file, and I'm going to go to downloads, and I'm going to download, I'm going to upload out of my downloads folder the demo database. Okay, so once I've selected it, I'll click submit, and it'll start processing at that point in time. And if my toolbar wasn't showing down at the bottom, there would actually be a little percentage that's counting, and it would tell me the percentage of upload for the file. From there, it kind of goes through these check boxes and or goes through these checks, and it imports and tells you how many different items that is found and how many it's importing. In most cases, the transactions are going to be the largest part of the import, and that may take a few moments to complete. But so far it's imported our books. We just have one book in this test, our demo database. There's categories. The categories are going to be your major groups or minor groups. So when working with Shepherd staff, it had a way of grouping accounts together. All systems really do, but they called them major groups and minor groups. Church360 is going to group accounts together by a concept called categories, which we're going to talk about here in just a few moments. Then accounts are accounts. They're going to be the items that you use when you create transactions. Restricted funds are going to represent money reserved for a specific purpose. So it's going to be, hey, somebody gave money to the building fund. We're restricting the money in the building fund. So we've created this restricted fund. So no restricted funds or dedicated accounts in this database. So everything's kind of processing along. It'll also import all of your budgets. So the budgets are going to be, hey, we plan on bringing in this much money, or we plan on spending this much money. So all churches have at least an expense budget, and lots of churches have an income budget as well. The payees are going to represent the vendors. So I'd say vendors and employees. So these are going to be people that the church pays on a weekly, monthly, bi-weekly basis. So it could also be, hey, we're paying your electric bill, or we're paying back money that was borrowed or something like that. So those items can be payees. And then transactions are transactions. So those are checks, deposits, journal entries, so on and so forth at that point. So we're going to let that run just for a minute, and I'll come back and check on it here in a few seconds. So I'm going to go back to our other tab. This is the Learn website here for Church360 Ledger. And we just went through and talked about navigation, and we're showing the import. But let's go to the gear and let's review our general settings. And what we'll do is we'll talk about general settings, and then probably we'll talk about roles and users. Then we'll take our 5-minute intermission. So when we go to general, the general settings are going to be the general site settings for your Church360 Ledger site. So it's going to have church name, address, phone number. You're going to want to make sure the church name and address is correct, because that's going to be the information that's going to print on your checks. So we want to include the correct information there. It does have customer number. If your church is using checks and you want to print those checks from the software here, you'll have to decide whether or not it's a top check or a middle check. So and when they talk about top or middle, that's where the check resides in the 3-part form. So top means the check is at the top, then there's a stub followed by another stub. Middle means that there's a stub at the top followed by a check followed by another stub. So the company that we work with when it comes to checks is formsplusinc.com. So formsplusinc.com. You can go to their website. We've been working with them for a long time, as long as I've been here. So it was even before then. So over 20 years, maybe longer than that. So when you go to checks, you can scroll down and it will have the Church360 middle checks and it will have the Church360 top checks. So if that's something you wanted to consider, you could go to the website, you can select the check, and you could go through and see the pricing and get a quote and go from there. So definitely a possibility. And they'll send you samples if you want samples to test out and everything like that. So they've always been great to work with. So let's go back and go back to our site, top check, middle check. Then there's also if your check uses signature checks. So if two people, if your church uses two signature checks, you can basically have a spot for both signatures. It kind of adjusts the check just a little bit. So you want to make sure to check that option. If you're converting from Shepherd Staff, the middle checks here in Church360 Ledger will match the middle checks from Shepherd Staff. So you do not have to buy additional checks. Okay, so from there, after our general settings, we're going to go to roles. And roles is the area where administrators can go in and assign permissions to a group of people. So by default, it comes with the administrator role, and you can click on the role to make changes, but it comes with the administrator role, and that role has rights to everything inside of the software. Excuse me. Below that, we have a financial secretary role. And basically, usually when you're using the software, you're going to have 1, 2, or 3 people who are administrators, and everybody else is going to be lower on the, or lower in the tree or lower in the hierarchy there. So in looking at that, we have one called financial secretary, but you can add in as many as you'd like. So with the financial secretary, they're going to have a certain set of rights. You could also have one for like your ministry leaders or elders. And when you're setting up a role, what you're going to do is you're going to tell the system which book you want to allow those people to access. So these are elders, and say they're only supposed to access the church books, or maybe they're supposed to access the school books, or maybe they're supposed to access the thrift shop books. So you could select one or more roles. When you're selecting the one or more, you can select one or more books, and then you can go in and check the boxes to give them additional rights to the book. So in looking at this here, when they're in that book, you can state whether or not they can manage the chart of accounts, whether or not they can manage your recurring transactions. And let me state what each one of these are. So when you talk about managing your chart of accounts, it means you can add, delete, and possibly deactivate accounts. When you talk about managing recurring transactions, it means that you can remove those transactions from the recurring transactions view. Below that, there's going to be an option for can view all accounts, and then there's an option for can view. But let me go ahead and submit this for a second. Permission group cannot be created because you chose no permissions. Submit. Submit. Okay, so then go back into it and you'll see how it now shows selected accounts. So if I'm setting this up for elders and I say this is Christ Community Church, and then I say can view all accounts, or I say wait a second, these are elders, I don't want them to view all the accounts, I just want them to view their accounts. I can say can view, then I can go to select accounts, selected accounts, and then I can come in here and I can pick just the accounts that I want them to see. So these are elders, and maybe they only have access to view. Let me scroll down a little bit further to expenses, and maybe they just have access to view some of the church expenses. So this is in the chart of accounts hierarchy here. So I could say all church expenses, or it could just be a subset of the church expenses. And I can mix and match as well and uncheck the ones that don't apply to this role. So that's going to be one of the things that you decide on as administrators on who can see what when it comes to accessing the software. And sometimes it comes down to, hey, maybe it's just 1, 2, or 3 people inside of the church books, and they're kind of holding each other accountable to what's being done inside the software. And sometimes it's 10 people who are in the software, and they can just view, a good portion of those people can just view the information and not make changes. Okay, so I'll scroll back up to the top here and click X. You can switch to a different book, but then you can click X. Once you've selected your accounts, you can specify whether or not they can create transactions. So it could be deposits, journal entries, payments, transfers, checks, and transfers, checks. Then it also could be whether or not they edit checks or print checks. So, okay, so we'll click, and we're going to say elders cannot manage the chart of accounts. Elders in our case is only going to be viewing the different balances of the accounts. So we'll click submit. Now, if you have, like say you have different small groups and those small groups have their own checkbook, then this same concept would apply. You'd be able to go in here and state that, hey, they can view these certain accounts, but then they can print checks. So they'll be able to access certain accounts and print checks. So this is where you'll kind of ratchet down the permissions within the software. Once you've created a role, then you'll go to the gear here at the upper right. Then you'll go to users. Then at that point, you can say add a new one, and that's going to create a new user. And then at that point, you can type in the person's email address. Okay, so jim.bowling@cph.org. Then you can select the role that they're going to play. So say that Jim is an elder. Then at that point, you click submit, and then that gives that person rights to the software, and they can just access the parts of the program that you said they could access. Okay. So it is 10:44 right now. So we're going to pause at this point and take our 5-minute intermission. Then when we reconvene, we're going to jump into fiscal years, take a look at books, and we're also going to create our chart of accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer, and we'll reconvene shortly. Thank you, everyone. Hello everyone, welcome back. Okay, there we go. Okay, so escape and close that, then go back to Church360 Ledger. Okay, so we just got done talking about creating roles and creating users and kind of allowing people to have access to the software. There's a couple other things that I want to discuss before we actually create our chart of accounts. So we're going to go to the gear here at the top, and I want to go to books first here. And underneath books, this is going to be the area where you can create additional books and you can delete books. And the times that I see this used the most is when people are setting up a new site, they'll come in and create an additional book. It is completely separate from another book, but they may create a test book as well for just simply working with the software, becoming more familiar with it. So it could be a test book, and then it could start January and have a start date of 1/1/2019. And I've seen people use a test book to become more familiar with the software. So that's a possibility. Then you just go up here and you'd select your test book. The book would be completely blank, but you could go in and create accounts and create different things and try it out, and it wouldn't damage your current book. The one kind of downfall I've seen with that is I have seen in the past where people have created a new book for each year, and you really want to just have your book continue forward year after year and not create separate books for each year. So, but that's how you can create books and delete books. When you delete a book, it does delete the book and all of the transactions related to that book. So it completely eradicates and wipes those things out. Let's take a look at fiscal years. And fiscal years are going to be your finance years. It's going to be that time period from the start of close for that year. And in looking at this, we've had this system in place for several years now, and there's going to be a different entry for each year. You will notice that there's different colored locks. The gray lock means that the book is locked. So, oh, that's a good question. Let me I do keep an eye on the question box as I'm talking, and question that's like pertinent to the information that we're talking about right now is Betty asked, hey Betty, can you change the date of the year at any time? Go to the calendar to fiscal. Can you change the date? Oh, okay. I think I understand what you're saying. So you're saying at any point in time, can you change from a calendar year to a fiscal year? And I'm going to say yes for the most part. So I guess there'd be a little time gap probably. So if you decided to, like it says up here, change the start month of the fiscal year to, so it's March 14th. So if you were doing April, you could change over to April. So now it doesn't allow you to convert the current fiscal year to a non-calendar fiscal year. It allows you to say that, hey, starting in April, we're moving from from a calendar year to a non-calendar year. So you can't take the calendar and switch it to a non-calendar like that. But when you get to that point in time, it'll just flip and it will turn into a non-calendar at that point in time. It's not retroactive, it's only going forward. That's an excellent question. Thank you. Okay, so that's that drop box there. The gray lock represents the fact that those fiscal years or finance years are locked. If you have a red lock, that means that you're going to be applying that action to that year. So if you have a green lock, it means that you're applying that action to that year. Oh, you're welcome, Betty. So in looking at this, green lock is going to mean I'm unlocking that year. Red lock means that I'm going to be locking that year. So whenever you have the different color locks, that gives you the ability to unlock prior years and go in and make changes. So most people are going to lock those years and they're never going to go back and make changes. But every once in a while, you get into the first month of 2019 and you're like, oh, wait a second, I made a mistake. I want to go back and change it. You'll come into this fiscal year area and you'll click on unlock. That'll unlock 2018. Then you'll be able to go in and make changes. Then you'll click on the red lock to lock it. So the colored locks don't represent the status, they represent the action. Okay, there we go. So those are fiscal years and books. The next thing to take a look at is our chart of accounts. So I'm going to start a chart of accounts from scratch. So I'm going to go to our test book, and then I'm going to go to the gear, and I'm going to go to chart of accounts. So when we get to our chart of accounts view, it's going to have assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. So this system uses those 4 accounts. It's kind of like the basics of accounting. So this isn't the highest level of accounting. It doesn't allow you to adjust equity. It's not a accounts payable system, so it's just basic accounting. So assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. The system does calculate equity in the background, but it's just basically keeping the system in balance instead of somebody taking the difference between the income and expense accounts and applying it to owner's equity. It doesn't have that capability. It's just basically, hey, this is an imbalanced system. So for assets, I do want to switch back to my PowerPoint here. Here we go. And I want to show the account types and kind of explain the reason for being for each one of the account types and kind of when you're going to use them. So when it boils down to it, I think assets, basically, we think of those as what we own. So assets are what your congregation owns. We think of assets in 2 forms. So there's going to be current assets, and then there's going to be fixed assets. I think of current being monetary and fixed being non-monetary. When you're thinking about current, this is going to be the money in your checking and savings accounts. It also could be certificates of deposit. So lots of churches have CDs. It also could be stocks that the church owns. So if there's money in those areas, you would record these as assets and they would be considered current. So current assets. And when it comes to fixed, for those churches that want to enter in the value of their building, of their church, rectory, whatever other buildings they own, they can do that. And also enter in the value of the land, and if you have equipment. So those would be considered assets, and some churches do track assets. So to create an asset account, here we go. You'll go into your chart of accounts. You'll say new account, and you'll type in the name of the account. So we're going to do, I'm going to call this First Bank Checking. And then at that point, you can fill in account numbers. Now, the account number here is the account number inside of the of your chart of accounts. So this is not the account number with the bank. It's not your not whatever the opposite side of the ABA or checking number. It's not that number. So you don't want to fill in your bank account number and put that in here. This is going to be a number within your own chart of accounts. And most of the times they'll start out with 1. And then there may be some structure to these account numbers. Church360 Ledger does not require you to use account numbers. Some churches find them extremely helpful. They bring additional structure and organization to the chart of accounts, but some churches find them confusing. So we kind of walk the fine line there, and fell on the side of, hey, it's not required, but you can use it if you would like. This is a checking account, so we'll check the little box, and then we can enter in the initial balance, the amount of money that is in the account at the start of these books here. So I'm just going to put in $10,000, then I'm going to click submit, and then that's going to create my first checking account. Then I'm going to add in a couple more accounts. So I'm going to say new account, and let's call this one second bank checking, and say that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2. So that could be 1,000 or 10,002, and say that we have more in our savings account. Say it's $250,000. So then at that point in time, we can click submit, and it will save that account. And then I'm going to create a third account and call this first bank savings. And then this could be 1, 2, 3, 4. This could be 3. And this could have an initial balance of, or this could have a balance of $500,000. So my numbers keep getting bigger, and that's 5 million. Okay, so then you can keep adding in numbers, and the numbering sequence could be like all of our checking accounts will have the next to last digit of a 1, and then all of our savings accounts could have the next to last digit be a 2. So that could be like a tell about, you know, the difference between these accounts. So those are, that's the way you can enter in an asset account. And if it's going to be an account you write a check out of, you'll just check the little box for that. Then from there, you can group your accounts together by adding in categories. So categories basically are a grouping mechanism. These could be like mine for this. Asset accounts aren't the greatest example for grouping accounts together, but like I could have a category for checking, and then I could drag and drop, and you'll kind of notice that little red triangle there. That little red triangle, you just kind of want to keep your eye on that triangle. That will allow you to let you know, that will allow you to kind of tell, let me drag it down here to the bottom and redo that. That will allow you to see if that's been indented off of the left-hand side there. So the indented items will flow into the category. So first bank checking, and then second bank checking. So those two are going to flow into this category. And then we could add another category for our savings accounts. And move that up, and then drag that in there. So when you indent an account, it flows that money into the category that's above it. So you have rearranged accounts or categories, 2 new categories, 3 new accounts, and either I have the choice to discard my changes or to confirm my changes. And I'm going to confirm my changes. You do want to confirm your changes on a regular basis. So if you're in here making changes, you don't have to save your changes upon every single change, but it is just stored in your browser memory right now. So if your computer shuts down or you get a brownout or a blackout, you know, that information will be lost. So you do want to save on a regular basis. So next we're going to talk about restricted funds. So I'm going to Alt tab back to the presentation here. So after assets is restricted funds, and restricted funds represent money reserved for a specific purpose. These are not budgeted accounts, so they don't show up on your budget. The balances do carry over from year to year. The balances are held in asset accounts, so that's one difference between Shepherd Staff and some other systems, is that the restricted funds are considered part of the assets instead of being part of the liabilities. So let's go back to Church360 Ledger. To add in a restricted fund, what you'll do is you'll go to the bank account where you want to create that restricted fund. So I'm going to say new restricted fund and click on the plus. And then I'm going to add in the building fund. And let me capitalize the B there. Then click submit. And then that's going to add in the building fund. Now you'll notice a couple things when you add in the restricted fund. So one, it's going to add the fund and give it a zero balance. Two, it's going to create this unrestricted portion of the money. So it's saying $250,000. That's how much was entered into this checking account. So when you start restricting money, it says, oh, okay, well, that's fine. We have, we're going to unrestrict all of that money. And what we'll do in our next training is we'll go to new transaction and we'll show you how to transfer the money from unrestricted down to the restriction. So you're not going to enter in a balance inside of this view. You're actually going to create a transaction. And then say the building fund has $50,000 in it or something like that. You can go in and just transfer the money from unrestricted into the restriction. Okay, so building fund, scholarship fund, let's say youth fund, a youth group fund. Okay, and I just added in a couple there. So then at this point, once you've added in your restricted funds, you'll just save and confirm your changes. Now, with this being dual entry bookkeeping, double entry bookkeeping, and we've attached our restricted fund to the bank account, it also means that whenever we create a transaction, say we write a check, instead of using the restricted fund, we'd use the building fund for the asset. So anytime we do a deposit, instead of using the, I said restricted fund, instead of using the unrestricted fund, we'd use the building fund. When we're doing a deposit, when we're depositing money that's restricted money, instead of selecting unrestricted, we select the appropriate restriction. So this is going to take the place, or this is going to be used in lieu of using the asset. And then when we're working with restricted funds and this means, it means also that we need to have income accounts for our building fund, for our scholarship fund, and for our youth fund. So the income accounts and expense accounts will track the income and expense going into these funds. This restricted money will roll over from year to year, and it will just be stored in those accounts, and you can view that information on the statement of income and expense. Oh, I'm sorry, on the chart of accounts report. Okay, so let's go and take a look at liabilities. Liabilities are going to represent money that is owed. So, and it's not always just money that is debits, money that's like loans or anything like that. It could be a credit card, or it could be money that's dedicated, just depending on how you set it up. So liabilities are amounts that we owe. There's two types: short-term debt and long-term debt. So short-term debt could be payroll taxes. It could be healthcare savings accounts, which are more and more popular. It could be also offerings from other congregations. Then long-term debt could be mortgages, could be loans, and also could be car loans. So those are forms of long-term debt. So to add in your liabilities, here we go. You'll go to liabilities here. You'll go to new account, and I'm actually going to add a category first. So I'm going to add in payroll deductions. Then I'm going to add a new account, and let's say that the new account is payroll deductions. Actually, let me add in payroll taxes as well as a category. Okay, so then add in a new account, and payroll deductions could be the HSA that we're talking about, and it could have a zero balance. And then payroll taxes could be FICA zero, could be Medicare, could be Social Security. Now, every single church doesn't do their own payroll. So in situations like that, you may just enter in an account called payroll taxes, and you're just recording this larger transaction. If you're doing your own payroll, then you'll have the FICA, Medicare, Social Security, all depending on whether or not your employees are paying those types of taxes. So so I'll just add in one more, and I'll just call this federal taxes here. So 0. Okay, and save changes. I did receive a question from Betty. Hello, Betty. And Betty's question, I'll read it out loud so the group can hear. When you add money to a restricted fund, does it change the balance of the unrestricted account checking account? Yes, ma'am. So let me go back up there. And yes, when you transfer the money, when you create that transfer, it does decrease the, I think you're asking something slightly different. Oh, I'm going to answer that a little bit different. And I think your question is a little bit different than what I was saying. So when you deposit money into this building fund, so say somebody gives $1,000 to the building fund, this unrestricted would stay at the current balance, but the checking account balance would increase. So somebody gives $1,000 to the building fund, this would be 1,000, and then the second bank checking would go up to 251,000, but unrestricted would still be 250,000. So the only time once you've set up this system that unrestricted would be affected in that type of scenario would be if you were transferring money between unrestricted and the building fund or the restricted accounts there, so restricted funds there. Okay. Okay. So after the liability accounts, and let me just drag these into the correct area. Then let's take a look at income accounts. So liabilities, income. Income is going to record revenue received during the current fiscal year. These accounts are budgeted, so they'll actually show on your statement of income and expense. You can apply budgets to these accounts, and they'll show on your statement of income and expense. Examples of income accounts are offerings, interest earned on bank accounts. Could also be rental property, and these accounts zero out at the end of the year. So when working with these, let me go back to, there we go. So when working with these, you'll add your income accounts in under here. So you'll go to new account. And actually, I'm going to add a category first. So I'm going to call my category offerings. And tithes. Okay. Then I'm going to go new account, and I'm going to call my account general fund. And I'm not going to use an account number, but if you were going to use account numbers, so lots of times the income accounts will start out with 5, and then they'll end with a number. You can enter the number here. The example I like to show is actually putting the account number as part of the name, so it could go before the name or after the name, and then that gives me the ability to search. Type 0 here. That gives me the ability to search by name, so search by number. So there's definitely times where people want to just type in the number and find the account, so including the number inside of the name will make that possible. So some people put it before the name, sometimes people put it after the name. So let's say general fund, let's say building fund, we'll do building fund income. Definitely need a youth group fund. Okay. And then when looking at these as well, if you're using restricted funds, usually I'll create additional categories. And the reason why I create the additional categories is so that I can tell how much of my income is restricted and how much of my income is not restricted. So I'll have a category for restricted funds. So when I'm looking at my statement of income and expense, or even if I'm looking at any of the account views, I'll be able to say, hey, this is how much money came in for restricted funds, and this is how much that came in basically for general purposes at that point in time. So okay, so that is our income accounts. After income accounts, there are expense accounts, and expense accounts record how monies are spent. So anything that goes out of the church, in most cases, is going to use an expense account. These are budgeted accounts, and examples of these accounts are salaries, materials for church programs, office supplies, and postage. Also utilities as well, great example. So these are going to be examples, and these do zero out at the end of the year as well. So I did want to mention inside of Church360 Ledger, the last two account types, I've been like, hey, they zero out at the end of the year. To zero those accounts out, you'll go to the gear and you'll go to fiscal year. And actually, let me go to test book, go to here, then go to fiscal years. Okay, and basically when you lock that fiscal year, that zeroes out the zeroes out the initial balances for those accounts in the upcoming year. So 2018, I lock it, then 2019 has a zero initial or beginning balance. So this is kind of like running the year end in this program. Okay, so let's go back to the gear and go to our chart of accounts. Okay, and let's switch back to our test book so it's a little bit shorter and a little bit easier to see. So in our test book, our chart of accounts, we've entered in assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. Well, actually, we're going to enter the expense accounts now. So with expense accounts, I think the utilities is a really easy one. So you can add in a category for utilities. And then your utilities could be, for example, it could be, we have a company called Amarin in our area, but it could be an account called electric, zero. You could also have like a natural gas company. And then any other services that you have that are utilities. So you could have phone, you could have internet, there could be all kinds of things inside of there. But by entering these into the expenses, we can drag them underneath the category, and then those items will total together. So save and confirm my changes. But this is also where you'll enter in salaries as well. So you could have a category for salaries. Some churches will have categories separate for pastor salaries. So, and if that's the case, you may want to nest one category underneath another category. So, so say we have, and I'm going to do one more, and we're going to call this the office manager's salary. Okay, so like we have the salaries category, you can nest one category underneath another category. And you can actually go as many categories deep as you need. So sometimes you need more than one category. So then we can create our accounts, and then this could be pastor dash salary, I guess. Then 0 and submit. And then if there was additional accounts, sometimes pastors can have like a housing allowance or a phone allowance or something along those lines. So, and those can be considered part of the salary. And then you can drag those accounts in there. Then the money that goes, or the money that's spent out of these accounts would flow into pastor's salary, and then the office manager's salary and pastor's salary would flow into salaries, allowing you to see all of those salaries totaled together. So that one line item would be the total amount of salaries spent. Okay, so that's how we add in our chart of accounts. So next, let's take a look at budgets. So with budgets, we'll go to the gear here at the top right, and we'll go to budgets. And from there, you'll be able to see all of your income and expense accounts. So I added the 50,001, or that's 501,000. It's 500,001. And the numbers just inside the list. So some people like the numbers. If you do, feel free to enter them in. If not, you may just want to give it a try without the account numbers. So with those account numbers, they can make things easier, but sometimes they're just a little more confusing. So you and your church will decide how you want to approach that. Okay, so when you're here in the budgets, what you can do is you can type in either a total or a monthly amount. So you can budget your income, you can budget your expense. When it comes to income, you may just want to enter in the amounts that were given last year, so you have that kind of instant recognition on if you're bringing in as much as you did last year. But some people don't budget income at all. That's just strictly, up to the church on how they want to handle that. So. Okay, then electricity. So you can enter in totals. You can also enter in monthly amounts as well. So if you have natural gas and you have electric, certain months may be higher than other months. And you can just type in the amounts that you expect to receive each one of the months. So. And you just kind of go, through the process. Now, there is the ability to use a prior year budget or a prior year actual. You do have to have that information into the system to be able to apply that information. And you can do it for the whole statement of income and expense as well. So you could do it all for the whole system, all budgets for last year, all actuals for last year. Now, I'm just going to, here we go, save changes, and then that will save my changes. If you have a really long screen, you'll want to scroll down and save your changes at that point in time. Now, within this system, it does give you the ability to enter in next year's budget shortly after you start the current year budget. So you can enter in 2020 if need be. So, and then if you have older year budgets in here, you'll be able to pull up those prior year budgets as well. So this system does allow you to copy and paste. So if you export this to Excel and you work with your budget in Excel, you can come in here and then paste the budget into this window if you'd like. So that's budgets. After budgets, there's payees, and the payees are going to represent the people that you pay. So they could be businesses, they could be individuals, they could be employees. These are going to be the people that you pay. There's a filter here at the top that allows you to filter your payees. You can also use the add a new one down at the bottom to type in the name of the payee. So we'll do Craig Wilson. And then you fill in the street, city, state, and zip. You really only need the name to enter in a transaction, but if you're going to be writing a check, then you'll definitely need the street, city, state, zip. And then you can fill in notes as well. So, and then Craig Wilson. But that's the information that I have for this session. Let's go to our end of class quiz. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to post those. Okay. Okay, question number 1. There we go. Question number 1. What type of account is used to create a bank account? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the answer, or share the results. We'll share the answer right after the results. So the percentages must be off just a little bit. So 88% said asset and 13% said income. So we'll hide the results and we'll share the answer. And the answer is A. An asset account is the account type you would use for bank accounts. These accounts keep track of your bank balances. So I think sometimes the thought of income accounts kind of creep in when this question is asked, but when you go through and create your bank accounts, make sure to use asset accounts. Okay. Question number 2. There we go. If your church takes out a loan, what type of account should you create? A, expense, B, income, or C, liability? A, B, or C? Okay. We'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And we were unanimous this time. So 100% of the people said liability. So we'll hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is C. A liability account should be used to keep track of what remains to be paid. When you enter a transaction, checks, or journal entries to make a payment on the loan, use a liability account as the offset account for that transaction. This will decrease the amount of the loan when the liability is completely paid off. The liability account should have a balance of 0. So, and we'll talk more about loan payments in our next training. So, okay. Question number 3. Select the 2 type of accounts that can have budgets assigned to them. A, liability. A, asset. B, liability. C, income. Or D, expense. So you should pick 2 accounts, and these are going to be accounts that you can apply budgets. Okay, give it a few more seconds here. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So with this type of question, the percentages can be a little weird because you have to select 2, but so 90% selected income, 80% selected expense, and then 30% selected asset. So really that's saying like 90 and 10 selected income and asset, and 80 and 20 selected expense and asset. So we'll hide the results there and share the answer. And the answer is C, and share the answer. Let me see if I can refresh my screen here. There we go. I think that's working now. Perfect. So the answer is C and D. Income and expense accounts are the two types of accounts that can have budgets attached to them. To see how closely these budgets are being adhered to, view the statement of income and expense. So income and expense accounts. Next question, true or false? A restricted fund will carry over its balance when advancing your fiscal year or your finance year. True or false? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we were unanimous once again. 100% of the people said true. So we'll hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is true. A restricted fund will carry its balance over into the new fiscal or finance year when the fiscal or finance year is closed. Good job, everyone. And then the fifth and final quiz question. Here, launch. There we go. The balance in a restricted fund is stored in an asset account. True or false? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we had 89% say true and 11% say false. So I'm going to hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is true. Restricted funds are attached to a single asset account, and the balances show on the restricted fund, but they are stored in the asset account. Okay. So, do you have any questions? And I see that there is a question from Laura. Hello, Laura. Laura asks, is there a way to totally remove a payee from the list? And when I first started using the program, I didn't realize that if I didn't click on the name as it came up, so there's a unique thing with the workflow. If you're creating a transaction and you don't click the name from the drop list, it creates an additional name. What I would say is, if you'll put a ticket in for that, we'll have the programmers take a look. So at the bottom of here, I kind of left that open. There's a little I, and if you say send us a message, just send in the names of those payees, and we'll send it over to the programming team, and we'll talk to them about getting that taken care of. Oh, hello, Linda. Thank you. Okay. Before everybody starts dropping off, I do want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I really appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed the session, and hopefully I'll see you guys here in about, 1 o'clock, about an hour and 25 minutes. So, but if I don't see you then, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and wonderful weekend. You can definitely give us a call at 1-800-346-6120, and you can send an email to support@cts.cph.org. Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and sign off, and we'll get prepared for the next webinar. Oh, that's a good question. Just received a message from Kelly. Hello, Kelly. If you haven't signed up, let's see. If you haven't signed up for this afternoon's webinar, you can go to 360ledger.com and scroll down the screen till you get to training. And then once you're on training, you can go to, let's see, oh, it's not on there. April 4th, March, April. Let's say this, Kelly, I will sign you up right now. Kelly, will you post your email in the email box for me? In the email box, will you post your email in the message box for me? And actually, I have your email. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yes. And Linda, I will sign you up as well. Oh, thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Linda. Let me just paste this here. Okay. And as soon as this session ends, I'll be able to access the portal, and I'll sign Kelly and Linda up. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll sign off, and I'll see everybody here in just a few minutes. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon. For Jim Bowling, this is Rod Kiles. We are signing off.